Hi, I'm Riot.
I'm Alex.
And today we're doing
unboxing of PANGEA by REDIMP Games. Game was designed by Alexander Jagodinsky. I'm sure I'm butchering that. But PANGEA, it's a strategy board game about the Great Permian Extinction. Pretty interesting concept for a game. This was a Kickstarter that launched last July and has just been fulfilled and shipped and delivered here in the States. So pretty successful Kickstarter. It was a short one, I think only 14 days. I got about 150,000 if I remember correctly in funding. This is the...
That's pretty low, 150,000?
Well,
How much was the...
It beat its projection. I guess it was 20 grand, I think, to fund. So, for a fairly, they had a couple Kickstarters before this with REDIMP. Not many of them did very well in terms of the amount of funding they got. I think this is their most successful one. This edition is I guess the standard edition. This is not the deluxe edition. The only difference between the two is that the deluxe edition comes with more upgraded components. So nothing content-wise different necessarily. It's just all cosmetic upgrades to some of the components. This is going to have the stretch goals in it, however, and it will be different than the retail copy. This is the Kickstarter limited edition, as noted on the top of the box there. Flip it over to the back. In PANGEA, the board game, players take part in the simulation leading to certain groups of animals and trying to save them from imminent catastrophe. It is only up to the players how well their proteges are prepared for the cataclysm. So it's a competitive game, 1 to 4 players. There is a solo mode here and some AI components for the additional players. It's a 90 to 120 minute game for ages 14 and over, and we are gonna crack it open and see what we got.
That's my favorite part.
Just got delivered today. They had some shipping issues, as pretty much everybody does right now with the COVID situation. It was supposed to deliver in April. It is now early June, I guess. Still, I will say that REDIMP probably could have done a little bit of a better job in communicating some of those shipping challenges. There was some extended periods of time where it was kind of up in the air on what was happening. But, at the end of the day, it is what it is. Here, we've got the game, and we will open it up.
Let me see the lid.
Yeah.
What kind of cardboard we got going on here?
Not the thickest, but should hold up as long as you're not trashing it around.
Good artwork, though.
We got a rule book here. You want to throw up the...
Yes, sir.
Pretty small paper for the rule book.
Is it in order? That's a big question.
Looks like some introductions here on what's going on. Component overviews. Pretty standard. Setup. Game components in detail. It can be pretty intricate in terms of... kind of what you're looking at here is kind of all these, I guess it is kind of worker placement, how it plays out, right? You have a species of animal that you choose. Your goal in this game is to survive the cataclysm that wipes out many animals in the Permian era. This game will play out over, I think, 9 different rounds or epochs. And your job is to get as many points, victory points, I think they call them dominance points in this game, as possible to win, and also to survive the cataclysm. So we'll go over that when we pull the board out. There's kind of a unique element. If you get wiped out and you don't have any animals on the board when the cataclysm hits, you cannot win, even if you have the most victory points. So you have to obviously survive the apocalypse. So they've got some additional 1 to 3 player setup there.
And so each of those is broken down into somewhat hemispheres. Like you have the center of the board is kind of like the equator, and then as you go further south, it gets colder. The climate's different, and same with going up north.
Yep.
Correct.
Exactly. So we got the character boards here. Pretty thick. They were upgraded. I would have liked maybe to see some artwork on these on the back. This is the back of the character board. This is the front. I do appreciate that we've got punch outs here to be able to slot in your tokens as you're tracking your number of action points, and then as you're using your actual actions here
something to
on
hold
the
the
board,
cubes.
so
Nice.
they hold the cubes in. So that's nice. It is a huge pet peeve of mine when a game does not have anything like that. Especially something like this where you're keeping track of a lot of different things at once. So here's the invertebrates. Each species will have a special ability that allows them, a little bit of an advantage over their competing species for dominance. Each species has an expansiveness rating, which comes into play when you're trying to move into an area of Pangaea that another species is in. Those that have higher expansiveness will win those battles. It also has a say in who starts first in the first round. So the game is broken out into different turns, and you're going to be performing actions on those turns. There's an initiative track, all pretty familiar mechanics. You're going to be able to do 4 different actions in a turn. You can do an adapt action, which allows you to play, we'll show them in a little bit, but some adapt or evolution cards, which allow you, the adapt cards are kind of like the gotcha cards, where you put them on the side of your board face down, and then when another species does an action, you want to counter it. Maybe you have an adapt card that allows you to counter it. Evolution cards are kind of like passive abilities. You can play up to 3 of them, and they completely change how your character plays.
So you had mentioned something in the beginning about the competitiveness of this vertebrae or invertebrate. Now, compared to this guy, I mean, it seems like there's an obvious advantage and disadvantage to this guy. If you want to show that guy off.
Well, I think you got to think of it not in terms of physical size, right? An invertebrate could be something small that the synapsid couldn't even see, right? So they have that where the variance comes in here, and this may be a good example. The adapt action, or let's take a better example, the populate action for the invertebrates is only costs you 1 action point to do per turn. So you start a turn, depending on what era you are in, with either 6, 7, or 8 action points. It costs you 1 action point to populate, which is to put 1 invertebrate on the board. Synapsids are larger creatures, so they actually require 3 of your action points in order to populate. So, but they have
by force. Then.
They have an ability, their migrate ability, which lets them move across the board. They're much easier. It only takes 1 action point, where the invertebrates takes 3. So, yes, in some areas, certainly some species are going to have an advantage. In other areas, not. And the developer was very keen to say that they play tested the heck out of this thing. And that's why in the Kickstarter there weren't a lot of add-ons and other features that they included over and above what the game had already been developed at, because it had been play tested and balanced to their best of their ability. It's too early to tell if that was good or not. We haven't played a game. I haven't really read anybody who's played this version. Obviously, there's some Kickstarter preview versions of the gameplay out there. But we'll see. We'll see. There are 4 species. And if I'm understanding correctly, you have to play all 4 in a game. So if there's only 2 players playing, the other 2 are controlled by the AI, is how that works.
So they do have an AI then?
There is an AI
cool.
system that allows you to do solo play, and obviously any level of play up to 4 players. We've got tokens here. Doing various things. Again, I'm not super familiar with exactly what each one does. I think this is a hunger token. This is a warning token. So we'll get into those.
X would be the buried treasure.
Could be the buried treasure. Some more tokens here. Looks like some solo specific tokens. These are your species tokens. So this is where you're putting different animals out on the board. Those are the tokens you're going to be using.
There's some spiders there in that green that's not showing up right.
Yeah, it's amphibians. Again, it's kind of green, so it may not look good, but there's the amphibians there. I guess I can show you guys each of the species here. Amphibians are special ability. Whenever you use an active adaptation card, you receive 1 action point. So every time you play or use an active card you've already activated, you get a point. So it's kind of freebie. And then we haven't seen this Sauropsida. Pretty nasty looking. Whenever
I like him.
Whenever you win
He's
a
my
contest,
favorite.
you can draw an adaptation card. So that's kind of cool. And then I don't think we looked at the Synapsid special ability. The Synapsids, when Synapsids migrate to a different climate zone, which we'll go over on the board here in a minute, they do not have to occupy the lower ecological niche. So we'll get that in a second, but when you're moving across the board, every time you move to a new part of the map, you're forced to go from your niche where you are down one level. So we'll go over that, but there's 3 different niches in which you can kind of populate. And the higher up you go, obviously, the more advantageous it's going to be for you. We got some reference. Oh, these are like the solo AI cards here. These look much bigger on the Kickstarter preview. So they pull that up. So this, I believe, comes into play when you are playing less than 4 players. So this would be kind of the AI. You'll see some die results and then associated actions. So during different eras, there's 3 eras in the game. The Cerulean, the Guadalupean, and the Lopingian.
And that's different than the epochs or epochs. I would assume epochs, since it's apocalypse. Epocalypse would be before, right?
Well, I think it's spelled differently. Epoch is E-P-O-C-H. But I don't know. I think it's epic, but I don't know. Science. You're going to be rolling the die, and it's going to be, I think, dictating what they actually do here. So a populate, adapter, and migrate roll depending on the die that they roll. It looks like there's a couple extra things down here. Again, I haven't brushed up on these rules yet, but kind of a cool looking little mat, and there's one for each here for obvious reasons. And the back side, the special animal. There's some art.
And is this historically accurate as far as like these?
I haven't fact checked it, but I'm gonna assume that it is. I think it would be pretty bold of them to not make it so. If they're gonna make a whole game about it, but I would assume so. Kind of cool art. I like the art style so far. We also have, it looks like, a couple reference cards here.
I'm gonna show those.
I am. I'm just trying to see what's on each. So this would be kind of handy, right? So this backside shows you the evolution cards of each of the different species, right? So if I'm playing the Synapsids up top here, and I'm playing against Riot, who's playing the Amphibians, I can see what his potential evolution cards are. So if I know he's got a lot of them in his hand, he's probably got one of these, and he might play it depending on the situation that's on the board. So again, it is a competitive game. You're going to want to have a little bit of strategy and kind of predicting what your competitor is going to be doing. It looks like some key glossary terms here. A list of adaptation cards. So aggression, alertness, fast occupation, and then it looks like we've got some objectives. So these are the different objectives that can show up depending on what, I think it's the epic that you're in. There will be objectives that you can try and complete in order to get some victory points. Once you finish that epic and you transition into a new one or a new era, I think it's eras, then those objectives go away and you draw new objective cards depending on the era that you are in.
So 8 epics.
9,
and 3 eras.
3 eras.
So then it's broken down 3, 3, 3.
No.
No. Okay.
No, it is not. 4, 3, 2. Okay, so maybe we'll lay the board out here, and we'll go to the overhead shot.
Get a sense of
The board's, I think, it's pretty big. We're gonna see here, but.
Oh yeah, it's nice and large. I think you were better off sideways. Yeah.
Huge board. This has taken up a good chunk of the table, and there's going to be some cards along the sides here. So let's go over kind of what's on the board here. Obviously, this is Pangea. It's a grid-based system, so you've got zones A, B, C, and D going vertical, and then you've got the Laurasia continent, which is these 2 planes. You've got the interior continent, and you've got the Gondwana continent down here. And within those continents, you have different climates. So the first climate is the subpolar climate, which obviously is on the ends. You have the temperate climates here, and you have the interior climate there. And so the way this works, and it's kind of cool, is there's an extinction track that runs along the side of the board. And in the beginning of the game, you're going to be drawing cards to determine what the cataclysm is that's going to wipe out as much life as possible on the board and where it's going to land on the board. So one of the actions you can take in your turn is to move up the extinction track. And the cards that are at the end here, this is what's going to happen when you get to the top at the end of the game, what the event is. All the other cards are the possibilities that it is not. So if you're a player that's going up this track, you have an advantage of knowing, if you get all the way to the end, you know exactly what the cataclysm is that's going to hit and where it's going to hit on the board.
Well, now, aren't there 3 cards that go at that end?
There are 3, but they all determine what lane it is, A, B, C, or D, what climate it is, and what continent it is. So you know exactly what it is, and you know what the cataclysm itself is going to be, because there's 3 different kinds.
So if one happens to turn up, let's say, in this particular area,
you know it's not there.
So that would be the safe place to migrate to at some
Potentially. Point. But again, some of these cataclysms will do different things. So one of them will knock out all of the subpolar regions because it heats the planet up. The other one will knock out the interior region because it cools the planet down. One is like a meteor impact, I think, and it knocks out everything in a square around it. And I think they added a 4th one, which is Kickstarter exclusive. I haven't seen yet. But then there's also strategy in that, right? Because if I know where the end is and I start moving all my pieces there, then somebody else who hadn't had to spend all the action points to go up the track can follow me and not have to do it themselves. So you kind of have to bluff your way through it. It's kind of like Clue. It's kind of cool. I like that element of the game. You don't have to touch this at all if you don't want to. You can just play your luck and spread your species across the planet and know you're going to lose some.
Rabbits and roaches.
Yeah.
That's what they should rename this.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, there's a benefit to surviving. A, you have to have at least 1 animal on the board at the end of the game in order to win. You cannot win if you don't. And B, the amount of animals you have on the board at the end of the game will give you more victory points at the end.
And is there ways to get victory points along the way as
Absolutely.
you play?
Yep. And that will come in various actions. It will come out of your adaptation cards. It'll come out of your evolution cards. It'll come out of your objectives, which are down here. Again, if you complete an objective, if you're the first one to complete it, you'll get 3 points. If you're the second one, you'll get 2 points. So there's a lot of replayability with the game that they're touting because of all the adaptation and evolution cards. You can play the same species 5 times in a row and not have the same build because you have all these different adaptation and evolution cards.
So it sounds like Spore. Did you remember Spore?
I didn't play it. I remember it. I didn't play it.
Where like you would evolve from, like a cell structure, and different things would allow you to gain legs or...
Seems similar.
Well, I mean, just that one aspect, not necessarily.
Yep. All right. So let's look at some of these. So I just opened a bag that's got all the sector tiles and the extinction zone tiles that we were looking at on the side of the board there. So here's one of the cataclysms. This is the eruption of the super volcano. And again, this does something special, and there's a reference card that we'll get to in a minute somewhere in there that will show, okay, when the super volcano erupts, what gets extinct, like what areas of the board, how does it all impact. Another one here is the gamma rays, which would not be fun. Yeah, there is a 4th cataclysm here. This is the massive planetoid crashing into Earth. That would obviously cause some damage. And then the last one here is the disintegration of Pangea. That sounds really bad.
So you would definitely need to be able to swim.
Yes.
If the land is gone.
Yes. So we've got, these are the zones, right? So if this zone is chosen, right, the massive planetoid, The temperate zone in Gondwana would be where it hits, and specifically Sector C. So Lane C of the temperate zone in Gondwana is where the massive planetoid hits. And again, you would uncover that through process of elimination as you're working your way up the extinction track, because all these other tokens would be there and you'd be looking at them and not sharing with your other people on your table that you're competing against. So it does require some memory and being able to focus enough.
Yep, I'm already at a disadvantage.
We got some objective cards here. Again, just to show you kind of what an objective looks like. So this one is only available in the Caesulian era. This one's called Flexibility. If you have exactly one animal in each ecological niche, 0, 1, and 2, the first player to do that in that era would get 3 points. The second player would get 2, and the third player, all other players would get 1. So the third and fourth would get 1. And so there's the various kinds. That one's in the Lapingian. Perform 4 different actions in one stage. You get 2, first player only on that one, so no other people can get it after the first player. You have animals in all climate zones there. So these are going to help you get some victory points along the way and not have to really worry too much in the early stages of the game of getting a lot of animals on the board potentially.
And what are we looking at here? It looks like cards and tokens, which these actually look fairly decent.
Oh yeah, they got upgraded a little bit here. So let's take a look. So these would be your, let me pull up the board here. Did we punch out? That one?
Yeah, the invertebrate one.
Where are the invertebrates? Did you see
Oh yeah, I stole them.
Here's our invertebrate board. Your action marker would go and fit right up top there to show you how many action points you have on a turn. And then as you perform actions, your purple cube would slot in there. You only have 5 of these cubes, so you could say some of the adaptation cards will give you action points back. But if you use all 5 of your cubes, you cannot do anything else on your turn, even if you have action points to do so.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can only do 2 actions of each one. So as soon as that's filled, that's it.
Yeah, so you can't do more than 2 adapts, 2 populates, 2 migrates, etc. 2 is the max.
Alright, cool.
Pretty simple, but cubes are nice. Again, I like that they did the punch-out board.
Yeah.
And then the die, I don't know, it's a yellow die.
Is there
looks like amber. I don't know, kind of cool.
So is there a dice mechanic to it?
I think the dice mechanic comes into play with the AI, because you roll the die to determine what they're going to do. Alright. So kind of a cool, I mean, it's a pretty standard die.
I thought it was maybe like Catan, where like all of a sudden a thief moves around or steals your stuff. Or...
Could be in that version, in like the solo or the AI version.
Does that have a slide peel, or is it?
Yeah, it does.
Smart. More and more board games are doing that, which I think is been mentioned several times. It's much nicer.
I can get it.
When they work.
When they work.
Reminds me of the CDs when it says pull and you're trying to yank on that sticker, and like the first little part of it comes off, and then
you're stuck. So we got quite a few cards up here. Here is just a quick reference guide of what some of the limited components are in the game that we got, which are Kickstarter exclusives, etc. So that's kind of a nice, handy, if you pull up with somebody, say, hey, this is a Kickstarter version, I got all this cool stuff. Like that's just a shameless promo, as is that one. So we've got...
you gotta plug the shameless promo.
Okay, shameless promo entity. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming it's a game coming soon. And then Inquisitor.
I feel like I've heard that game before.
Coming soon. So REDIMP Games, I'm waiting for you. Let's see what else we got here. So we've got, these are your Turn of the Age cards. So as you transition from one era, epoch, I don't know what we're calling it anymore, to the next one, there is a turn of the age that you end up doing, and everybody would have to do it.
Now that says solo mode. So are there solo cards and then non-solo cards?
Looks like it. So there's probably some ones that are just for the solo mode turning of the age, and then there's some other ones that are for non-solo play. So this one just says, going from the Guadalupian to the Lopingian. This could be one that you get. You would flip it over, and it would say, okay, we have some hostile ecosystems. In initiative order, each player must pay 1 victory point to perform a free adapt action or remove one of their animals from the game board. So some of these are good, some of these are bad, and it's random. You're only going to see 2 of those per game, and it looks like there's, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 of them here. So some replayability there. Yep. We've got some region cards here, and I think these come into play in the solo mode. And they're pretty straightforward. It's just where on the heck Pangea, telling you. Again, I haven't seen those in a playthrough video, so it must be the solo mode. We've got, so these are the end of game reference cards. So they call it the Doom. And the Doom always happens, so the epicenter is what we talked about earlier, right? So it could be Sector C in the temperate climate of Gondwana is where that meteor hits. Okay, so the meteor hits there. Every animal is dead there, and then these red boxes. And then step 2, there's a shockwave. So all animals in the 4 regions diagonally adjacent to the epicenter also die, except for the ones in niche number 2. So if you've moved up to niche 2 in that area, you would survive. We flip it over, and then there's some other things that happen. So, for instance, the eruption of the supervolcano, has global cooling. All animals in the interior zone, which is the middle one, and niche 2 in temperate zones survive. Everybody else dies. The massive planetoid, extreme heat. So all animals in the subpolar, so on the top and bottom of the board, and in niche 2 survive. Everybody else dies. Annihilation of a subcontinent. All animals on the subcontinent containing the epicenter is, and containing the epicenter is, typos there. And all other animals in the ecological niche 0 die. That's a big one. And then disintegration of Pangea. All animals in the sector and zone of the epicenter, and all animals in niches 0 and 1 in the direction of the shockwave die.
So that phase is called the Great Dying. I'm assuming that happens every...
This is the end of the game.
Every game.
Yep, it always happens at the end of the game.
So, it's just what region you're only going to be limited. You're going to be very limited on what square is left.
Yes, right. So here's a visual representation, right? And maybe the backside are some of the easier ones to understand. So the eruption of the supervolcano. Everybody in region, the red region on the board, is dead. And anybody that's in niche 0 and 1 in orange is dead. The only surviving ones are niche 2 in orange, and then the middle row.
Wow. That's, yeah.
So you could get lucky.
Yeah.
But you could if you don't know, and you don't have any animals on the board, again, you automatically lose. You just know what you can.
My winning streak will be solely based on luck. Because there seems like too much math and science and elimination and memorization.
There seems to be a fair amount. This is a thinking game for sure. Solo mode, there's some game end conditions here. Again, I don't really know much about the solo mode yet, so I can't really dive into it. But it looks like there's some special game end conditions with them. Let's look at some of the evolution cards here. Each species has a set of evolution cards. It looks like 6 apiece. So on the back of the evolution card, it tells you what you can do. So activating evolution cards will cost 1 adaptation card, right? So you have your board. You play an adapt action, which is 2 action points, to load one of your adapt cards that's in your hand over to your active adaptation cards section here. Then you would play another adapt action to play your evolution card. but you can't activate that card until you discard or play an adaptation card there. Once you do that, you have this evolution. Everyone can see it. Everyone knows what you're doing. In this case, this animal can never be devoured. It does not suffer any hunger penalties and scores 1 victory point whenever a hunger marker is placed in its region. This animal is removed from the game board if a hunger marker is in its region at the beginning of the survival phase. The expansiveness value is 5.
Well, that ain't me, because I'm always hungry.
So we've got cards that don't cost any adaptation cards, so these would be a little less game-breaking. And then we have some that cost 2. So taking a look at a number 2 card here. After the populate action, you can spend 1 more action point to move forward by 1 on the extinct track. That is huge, because normally your survive, which is what you would do to move up the extinct track, costs 2. This lets you do it for 1. So that's a really good card. Saves you action point. So 6 of those. And again, we won't go over all of them, but there's extinct cards for everybody. And the extinction cards are specific to the species. The adaptation cards are not specific. The adaptation cards will be applicable to all races, or races, playing like a fantasy game, to all species. And they're not quite as game-breaking. Like this one, after performing the populate action, you can place an inactive marker on another player's animal in the region you have just populated. If you do, you can also spend 1 action point to score 1 victory point. That's kind of cool. Once you use these cards, they're 1 and done. So you would play an adapt action to place the card, and then you would use the action, use the adaptation ability according to the description on the other side. There's 3 things you can do with these cards when it is active. You can discard it to pay to evolve, to load an evolution card like we just talked about. You can use the ability on the other side of it, or you can discard it at any time to get 1 action point back. When you play this card, when you use your adapt, you just put it down, face down like this, so your other person doesn't know, your other competitors don't know what the card is. You don't have to play it till you want to play it. And when you play it, you flip it over and say, boom, I just did my populate action, so I'm going to make your animal inactive, which means they will not be able to migrate, score any victory points. There's a lot of these cards. You're going to be playing these kind of more fast and furious throughout the game.
And then, yeah, what we got in there?
These must be the Kickstarter exclusive items. Oh, yeah. Warning, don't give these to children. So these are, these are cool.
All right. Move this out of the way here.
We've got ourselves a little Doom marker. I think this thing is awesome, and I might ask you to paint it. It's, hopefully you can see it. It's the globe, but there's like a planetoid coming into it and destroying it.
That's sick.
So that goes along the top of the board to track what era you are in. You move it along the board like that. We've got one of these standees for each of the different... sorry, that's probably a bad one because we got the chroma on. Let's use this one. For each of the different species. So I think this is the synapsids.
Well, they look fossils then. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. These are victory point trackers. So you can get up to 20 points on the board. Once you get to 20, you flip this over to 20 and you reset on the board. Excuse me, on the board. And then
I do hope they sell that separately.
It's really cool. These are really cool. And these feel really cool. They feel like kind of fossil-y.
Oh, yeah,
they're kind of like a rough feeling to them. And
pretty cool.
I like the way they did these bases, because if you put it on the board with a circle, it's much easier to put 2 of these instead of them being full circular bases.
That's right. I think only 3 can occupy a space at a time as well.
Depends. Yeah, it depends on the terrain, but yes, that would be the max. So these are kind of cool. I'll bump the rest out so you can kind of see them.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah. They have like little rocks and stuff.
Yeah, this one's kind of glossy.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yep. And I think those are the components. What do you think?
I I haven't played it, but I'm interested to play it. I did see a playthrough. I don't remember with who, or maybe it was from the Kickstarter that I watched the playthrough. I'm anxious to try it because it looked really good. It looked interesting. You know, but it's one of those things where you have to give it a go. I think this one would be one that I have to play 3 or 4 times before I actually get the concept of what all is going on and what all I can do. I don't think it'll be as confusing as some other games that are, and very chunky. I don't think it's that chunky. I think there's a lot of rules, but once you get them down, they're pretty easy.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just first impression of the components themselves. I mean, I think my pledge was $50. And
that's
which
not
is
bad at all.
not bad at all. You know, most of these games on Kickstarter now are starting at $80. Like I haven't found a game much cheaper than that.
Standard retail game is like $60.
Yeah. So we'll see what the MSRP on this is, retail version. But I mean, just for what I paid, the components, everything is there. I saw one spelling or grammar error so far, and I know there were a couple that they've already mentioned.
I think these sheets here could have been a little thicker.
Mm-hmm. And bigger.
Yeah. Especially for me, because I have problems reading. Well, I don't have problems reading. I have problems with my... Well, no, I have problems reading too, but I have to have the cheating glasses. But as far as the cards themselves seem... I mean, you don't want to bend them for sure, but they seem fairly sturdy.
Yeah, they got the linen finish on them, which...
I've seen stronger cards.
Yeah.
It's not the cheapest, but it's not...
Yeah. It could be another millimeter thick.
Boxing wise, I'm curious. How many bags did they give you?
You got a bunch in the box there.
Okay, yeah. Looks like we'll have plenty of bags.
Yep.
Yeah, so putting it away looks fairly simple.
Yeah. So
those on top, rules on top, that's underneath that, and then all your cards and smaller things go underneath
and
that.
technically, you don't even need the Kickstarter box. They probably just did that to make it easier for them to do mass production for retail. So
outstanding. So we're gonna give this a shot then, and
I think we are. We just gotta punch out everything, probably go over the rules for 2-player a little bit, and we'll get a playthrough up on the game shortly.
Hopefully you'll see us then.
All right, thanks everyone.
Take care.
Take care.